And we're live.
Hey, LeVon.
Hi, Leslie.
How are you?
I'm great. Thank you,
Good
and
to see
welcome
you.
to
Thank
Local
you.
2300.
Oh, it's good to see
UAW.
you.
Yes,
Thank
same
you so
here.
much.
So,
And since we're not on Cornell's campus, we don't have to, the mask mandate's been lifted.
no, you don't have to worry about that here today. We're not wearing masks. It's
Okay.
your choice. Your
Well,
choice.
I
Yes.
think Governor Hochul just lifted the mask mandate across the state, right? Is that
Yes, and Cornell is meeting now and discussing, looking at science and the matrix and where they are with the students and how many cases are out there, and we're looking to make some changes there at Cornell. Sometime I would say mid-April, they will have more information concerning that.
Well, congratulations to
Yes.
you on getting through 2 years of pandemic.
Yes, it
LeVon.
was.
It's been a lot for everybody, I think.
Yes, it has, and we're taking one day at a time and looking at what's next, because
Yeah.
this might not be the end of the pandemic.
It might not be the end.
Yes,
No.
so-
Well, your staff have been, so UAW represents the Cornell staff, right? And-
Yes, we have several departments on campus we represent, dining, building care, grounds, botanic gardens, a number of different, transportation, campus to campus. We have a number of items on campus. That
So
we
you folks have
represent.
been in the thick of it through this whole pandemic, no doubt.
Yes, we all have learned how to deal with it. You know, if it's gonna be here with us, we know what to do.
Good for you. Well, let's chat a little bit about what you do. I wanna hear it.
Well, that's, I deal with grievances, and most importantly, I like to say that our job here is to, we're partners with Cornell. Even though we're the UAW and we have a contract, so that contract is my job to make sure that we follow, that Cornell follow the rules of the contract, and our staff members also, we have a responsibility as well to make sure that the job is getting done and no rules are broken, but they always will be. So we come together and with a resolution that's going to work for both sides.
That's tremendous. How
Yes.
many, how many members do you have here?
We're roughly around 1,200 here on campus. Also, I service TCPL, which is Tompkins County Public Library, Ithaca Housing Authority, Bolton Point
Yeah.
Public Water System. I have a total of 8 contracts that I service.
Good for you.
And that's all similar works, except we have private and public. And say private here on campus would be the veterinary college. That's private. So outside of that, the contracts are all the same. You know, with the contract for both. It's different, slightly different, say rules when it comes to the insurances for the private sector versus the public sector. And the funding is also state funding, the private sector.
So, what are your members thinking about right now? What's on folks' minds?
You know, during this pandemic, it's taken off the masses, number one.
Yeah.
Vaccines have been a situation that at first everyone was, feeling that this is something we need to do to be safe. And then as science switched and made changes, there was some back and forth concerning what's going to keep us safe if we all are vaccinated. Will this take care of the problem and we all can go back to normal? But that seemed to shift gears in certain ways, and then we looked at the fact that, okay, now we are vaccinated, We're still, some of us are still getting COVID. We're still, sick. So members started to think that we don't want to do this anymore. We don't want the booster. We have 160 members that have not taken the booster. And so at this point now, people are looking at their own immune system. Do we have natural immunity? If we've had COVID, are we safer, or should I say, are we equally safe with natural immunity? And then another concern is pay. Number of entities around town. Walmart has increased their pay without a contract negotiation. And Walmart saw that, okay, we need to increase our people pay if we're going to retain them because of labor shortages. Those same labor shortages has affected campus to a level that our people, our members, are doing more for less. And I say more for less because if you're consolidating jobs and those individuals are covering more than one area or splitting an area with another member, they have really stepped up to cover those labor shortages. And so individuals are looking at what's going to happen with our next contract. We will be entering contract negotiations very soon. And doing so, they are looking at the size or the percentages of increases across town, and as well as Tompkins County and beyond in New York State, and wanting, should I say, a fair increase. We recently, Target has increased their starting pay from $20 to $24 an hour for their people. Our average.
That's substantial. That's almost a 25% increase.
Yes, and our average starting pay for our members is around $18 an hour. So our prestigious university at Cornell, our members look to feel that Cornell will measure up to some of the other companies, that we will get to that same level. And that's a concern, because when you have a large university, they have already signed contracts. We, as the police department here, Cornell Police, as well as a BTC, that is another contract on campus. These individuals they worked on their contracts before the labor shortages came about, so they're already set, and that benchmark there, where they are, normally spreads to our members, to the UAW. So we are saying, well, inflation was not at 7.5% when those contracts were signed. And also, looking at the cost of goods in general, all of our shipping issues that we experienced, led to that, as well as just the fuel shortages that we're dealing with.
It's expensive now. It's expensive just to live, just to raise a family.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
$17.50 an hour, that's tough, I think,
for
a lot of folks.
When you go into the grocery store and you see as high as a 30 to 40% increase on cost of goods, it doesn't go far.
Well, we're seeing gas prices go up. One of the things that I'm particularly concerned about is how, energy companies, a lot of top companies have made actually a lot of money through the course of the pandemic.
Yes.
And we do have a labor shortage. We've got a lot of people who, a lot of companies are looking for workers.
Yes.
And so if these companies have made a whole lot of money and they're looking for workers, that should be a recipe for raising wages. We should see wages go up.
Absolutely. Also at Cornell, campus, our student population has increased. We added on an additional 5,000 students. I would say we're close to over 30,000 students. All those students got to be fed. Students, they're going to be
So
there.
you do dining services, and if you have facilities managers,
Cleaning, all these things.
all these things, you've got 5,000 more people's appetites and care and feeding to take care of.
Absolutely, and that tuition does not decrease. It's still there. So even though all these things are happening, companies like Cornell, they'll bounce back. They're probably, I would say their budget is probably balanced right now, and they'll continue to prosper. But to our people, our members, that struggle continues, especially with the cost of goods and the things we just spoke of.
Well, I think we're seeing a real crunch in education across the board. There's no doubt about that.
Yes.
But at the same time, we've got a lot of families here who really are struggling. And the economy, the way it's structured right now, it's pushing people out of the middle class. And we got to look at that, because American democracy was built on a continuing to grow the middle class, right? And right now, the middle class is shrinking.
So what is your vision to improve the situation of the middle class dwindling down and actually moving out of New York State? What is your vision?
Yeah, so people are leaving New York State, and the people who are leaving are not the folks at the tippity top. We actually had an experiment, if you will, over the last 2 years with COVID. We saw during the period of COVID that
Yes.
the folks with the most are not who left New York State. The folks at the very tippity top, the billionaires, we don't have a lot of billionaires around here, but there's a lot of people who make a lot of money off Wall Street investing, they actually did not leave. They might have left temporarily, but they're coming back and they're still in New York. And so that sort of answers the question that a lot of people had for a long time, which is, if you equalize the tax structure so the people at the top are paying the same as the people at the bottom. Right now, the people at the bottom pay a lot more in taxes than the people at the top do. If you were to equalize that, what would happen? Would the wealthiest people leave? We've learned that they did not.
Okay.
Because this is New York. People don't live in New York because it's a low tax state. They live in New York because it's New York. And so to me, that means we have to start treating everybody fairly. We can't continue to have the working class and the middle class subsidizing the folks at the very top. Because the working class is who's leaving. That's where our big population loss is.
Yes.
And yeah.
So we understand we're talking about taxes, and
Yeah.
I want to come back
And
to
taxes
labor.
can get really boring, but I got to tell you, look at a society's values, and you can see it reflected in the budget.
Yes.
And so, I get very interested in taxes and economics, because when you're interested in social concerns and advancing equality, you can see that in the bottom line in your taxes.
So what is your view on living wages during this high inflationary period? What is your view?
Well, I think wages need to go up. And I think that, we had set a benchmark a couple of years ago. New York State said it was aiming for a $15 minimum wage across the state. That started downstate. It gradually was to be implemented upstate. That was something that I was really happy to support a few years ago when it went into place. But now what we see 3 or 4 years later, post-pandemic, is $15 is not cutting it for people. And so our definition of a living wage today is not the same as it was when we made this big advance just a couple of years ago. So I think the first thing we have to do is really take a hard look at, what do those words mean? Living wage? It means, what can people live on?
Yes.
Right? And if you have to live by working 2-3 jobs in order to make ends meet, and at the same time you still are at the risk of a healthcare crisis or a lost job or a car accident, kicking out of the middle class, that's a real problem.
So would you advocate for increasing or decreasing taxes during this time?
I would advocate for decreasing taxes substantially on lower and middle class folks, and getting the very tippity top, the top 0.1%, getting them to pay what the rest of us pay.
Okay.
So I would like to see the first thing I intend to do when I get to Albany is to focus on cutting property taxes in half. We can do that in New York State because in New York State we right now use property taxes for things that no other state uses property taxes for. It should come out of income tax. Property taxes are very regressive. And if we can cut property taxes in half across the board and start paying for health care, Medicaid, out of the general fund, out of income taxes instead, that's going to do a lot to equalize the playing field for people. It's not going to just help homeowners. Property taxes being cut in half, that's a good thing for homeowners. It also really helps renters because anytime a landlord sees high taxes, they're going to pass that cost on to renters. And so it's an important thing to do for renters. It's also an important thing to do to equalize education because right now our schools are disparately funded. Schools in poor communities get less than schools in rich communities because it's reliant on the property tax system. That's not fair. It's no child's fault where they get born.
Yes.
And so if we can fix this real property tax problem and cut property tax for most New Yorkers, I think that's going to make a huge change.
And knowing that property taxes come from a large portion of that from the school after from our hold on that one. Let me start over on that. We know that our large portion of property taxes go to after-school funding as well as different areas of teachers, their pay scales, all these different things. How do you support after-school programs through property taxes?
Well, we should be supporting childcare in a completely different way than we do right now. And after-school programs are one piece of that. We should recognize that education and childcare go from birth to college or post-college or however far a person wants to go. But it starts at birth and it goes all the way through primary and secondary school. And it doesn't just start and stop from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Yes.
And so if we were to start recognizing that the educational life cycle for a child is much more than age 5 to age 18, just 9 to 3, and start funding it that way, the sky's the limit for us.
Yes.
But we've seen this systematic evisceration of public education over the last 30 years. I think a lot of it has to do with deciding that the wealth of a community around the school is how you decide how well the school's going to perform.
Yes.
And you see in rural poor communities and in communities, low-income communities inside cities, the exact same problem. The wealth around the community is not enough to create the school that we need to give our children. So we got to get rid of that model.
Yes, and also right to feel safe. We've heard a lot of talk around the Constitution, and that's buzz is coming from you making individuals making their own choices. So what is your take on right of choice during this time?
Which kind of choice are you talking about?
The choice to choose.
I'm a big advocate for women's health care, so I hear choice in a particular way, but I don't think you're talking about women's reproductive health care.
The right to choose whether individual would like to take the vaccine. Do you feel that it's a community health crisis that should be administered according to what's needed to keep everyone safe, or supporting a individual choice?
So I do believe that as a community we need to come together and get vaccinated as a community, because it's not about each individual person. It's about creating a community, a herd immunity, so that the resources of our hospitals can be dedicated to the people who are at highest risk. So, for example, if someone is having a heart attack, but all the hospital beds are already taken up with people who have COVID, then the community can't take care of that person who is having a heart attack. And so to me, it's very much about making sure that we as a community are helping each other, and that we are making sure that we're being good neighbors and being compassionate people with each other. So that's why I got vaccinated,
Yes.
and that's why my children are vaccinated, my family's vaccinated, is because I believe very passionately in taking those steps that I can take to be a good neighbor and to help the community around.
Yes. Moving forward, what we have learned about the pandemic and about the vaccine, I feel the vaccine is safe. But what part do you feel your primary physician should play in this role, and knowing your medical history?
Well, I think that anytime you get into a medical conversation, the physician and the patient should have that conversation. And I think that once you get into, I thought when you were talking about choice, you might be talking about women's reproductive health care. I think there is really a place for making sure that doctors and patients can have that open and honest conversation with each other.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
And going back to our economy, that is a topic that we all are dealing with right now. Do you feel that the situation in Ukraine, that's going to affect our economy? So it's stated it will, and that inflation will go even higher. It will affect inflation.
We're seeing a very interesting time with inflation right now, and again, reflecting back on what you were saying earlier, we see regular people, regular working people, really struggling, and I think we need a course correction in America where you don't see this massive wealth inequality, this huge divide where the dramatically increasing population are the working poor, and the wealth keeps shooting to the top, and the outcome is the middle class is getting smaller. That hasn't happened really at any other time in American history. Now, what Ukraine might have to do with that, we'll have to see. We've already got massive supply chain problems across the globe. This is going to be a very different kind of war. It's a war that people are able to see playing out in real time in a way that we have not ever experienced as humanity before, because everybody carries a device in their pocket and they can film exactly what's happening right in the moment. So I don't know, and I think there's a lot of economists who don't know exactly what this war's effect on the economy is going to be. It might not be the same as previous wars. That said, we have a problem in America of tremendous wealth inequality, and regardless of what's happening out there on the global front, we have to fix that.
Yes, and I think one question that most people are asking themselves as well, I ask myself, how do we continue to support an open border and take care of all these individuals coming in? And I am an advocate for taking care of the refugees and giving them a better life, increasing their quality of life. But that has to affect our economy.
Well, and here in upstate New York already, I'm a big advocate for farmers, and I spend a lot of time communicating with people in the agricultural industry. And we did see during the 4 years of now ex-President Trump's presidency that the policies of the federal government had a direct impact on the labor force in upstate New York related to our farmers. And so it's not just, it is very much a moral imperative in my view to be good neighbors and make sure that we are extending our hand in times of need to people. But at the same time, there's a lot of farms and folks in other industries who rely on a workforce that is constantly shifting and changing in the United States. And we see that right here in New York. So I heartily disagreed with a lot of President Trump's policies on that because I saw how it was hurting our upstate New York economy. And also because from a moral perspective, as you point out, we have to be good neighbors.
Yes.
So I have a question for you too.
Yes.
I saw online that you wrote a book. Did you write a book? No, you didn't write a cookbook? Oh, perhaps I'm wrong. I thought maybe you wrote a cookbook. I must have that wrong. I apologize.
No, I did not.
Okay.
My wife is the culinarian in our family.
She's the culinary expert in your household?
Yeah, she's a CIA grad.
She's a CIA grad?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Culinary Institute of America?
Yes.
That's very prestigious.
Yes, it is, but
So you probably eat well at home?
Oh, yes, I do.
Or maybe she gets tired of it once she gets home.
Well, I share the cooking also.
Okay, well that's good.
So,
well, listen, is there anything else that you want to make sure folks know about what your union brothers and sisters are paying attention to and what the UAW and specifically the group at Cornell and elsewhere in Ithaca are concerned about?
Well, we covered labor shortages and our contract of a fair contract for our members, and, that they're going to have a living wage. As we know, that paradigm has shifted as well. We're currently borderline for anyone that's at $15 to $18 per hour, and unless
that's borderline for being able to survive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And those are the major, and safety is first and foremost is safety. And that we look at the pandemic, but also here in Ithaca, we're having some issues here with safety. Our police department, we need to support our police department. We also want to have social workers involved and also peacekeepers, but our police department has to be maintained in order to feel safe. If people do not feel safe going downtown Ithaca, and we have a problem. For tourists, for also their students who are here at Cornell, they're here for the first time. They want to feel safe that they can go down and see sights and have dinner and not feel like that there's crime is going to overtake them. So that is a problem for all of us, for everyone, is crime. So we're looking for common ground here, but for the entire community. But coming back to not just Cornell, we have other contracts around town as well, and that safety is a concern for everyone.
Well, I think those are the basics. Can you make enough money to provide for your family? Are the schools functioning well, and are they going to give our children, our next generation, the strength that they need to grow and survive?
Yes.
And do we feel safe in our communities? I think you talked about it, LeVon. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it.
I want to say I thank you so much. I don't even consider you a politician.
Well, I have not held elected office, so I don't know if I count as a politician.
Well, I count you as a friend of the people, a friend of our membership of the UAW, of labor. And that's most important, that you're trusted. And I really appreciate your continuing efforts to hold office
thank you.
as a U.S. Senator.
I really believe that we need a voice for our region on the Senate floor. we've been left behind for too long. So we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there, LeVon.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Very
much. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.